the way the occupied area hangs together, and you got the white of the paper working just as nicely with the composition. Now, this painting was not conceived by an actual still life setup. I just noodled something about 3 inches by 2 inches, and roughly got an idea of the placement of things and the size of things, and it went from there. So, you know, it may look as if it was done quickly, but really it isn't. I do a lot of thinking as I paint. There is a nice balance of occupied active space here against a sky. It's not 50-50, you know, it's about 70-30 or something like that. And the same thing is true of this one, of Gold Street. I'd like the contrast. The contrast is very strong, the white of the buildings against the darkness of the trees, and yet there is a lot of lively color to them, that painting that I like. So I would have to classify these two perhaps as my favorites here as a landscape. So I try, when I do the figures, particularly in the small figures like these, I perhaps get a little bit of an attitude toward the positioning of them, one leaning toward the other, so there's some interaction between them. The treatment of these figures, I blotted some of the figures so that the values change and the intensity of the color changes, and that gives them a feeling of motion of that. It's almost like throwing a baseball, and I tried to capture that from the memory I had. I had painted perhaps 1 or 2 other paintings of surf casters based on that long time memory. Into wet, I wet the whole paper with clear water and let it sit for a while until the sheen disappeared, and then I started painting. I started painting the yellow area first, the lighted area, and then as it dried, I put the colored people in, just suggested, and as it dried, I kept going further and further away from that, and getting my darker values in. But as I worked, I got mid values and worked toward the darkest values. The darkest values came in last. In case I might put the yellow one first. It would be raw sienna, not yellow. Raw sienna is a good color to use for something like this. It dissipates or spreads easily with cerulean or cobalt blue. Area of water with clear water first, and again wait for it to dry somewhat for the sheen to go off the wetness, and then put the yellow in, and while that's still wet, put the blue in, a very pale blue, cerulean blue, and while that's still wet, but you have to allow it to dry somewhat, and then you put the reflections of the buildings and the trees in lastly. To get this streak across there, to make it look like it's a flat surface, a skim of maybe a breeze across the water, I take a damp brush and just pull out the paint. And a darker stroke, I add a little paint. That's how that's done.